Okay, welcome everybody to the Programmes and Resources Committee on Friday the 6th of December 2024. Delighted to see so many people here for what is a relatively short agenda. It doesn't mean it's any less important though, so I do appreciate everybody coming in today. Just to let you know why it's a short agenda, as you know, we normally we have a programme of looking at the various aims of the management plan as we go through the year. And this year, the intention was this meeting we'd be discussing and exploring nature recovery with Sue Fletcher. However, there was a budget announcement by the government on the 30th of October, as you know, for increasing employers' national insurance. And so the senior team, the heads of service, along with the finance team, are busy revisiting the budget and reconfiguring what's in there. So they're prioritising that over bringing that particular aim to programmes and resources this month. However, we've still got the January and April meetings to look at the programmes and the aims of the management plan. So in January, I think the meeting's about the 24th of January, we'll be looking at sustainable communities then, and in April we'll be looking at nature recovery and engagement. Okay. The first item is apologies for absence. I have Becky Woods, Jill Heath and Charlotte Farrell. I don't think there's anybody else who's not here. So if we could go to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of September. And can I say thank you to my Vice Chair, Charles, for chairing that meeting. I think I was on the Isle of Arran that day. But thank you. Any mistakes or errors in those minutes? I'll go through it page by page. First page of the minute, second page, third page, fourth page, fifth page. Okay, so could I have somebody to move the minutes? Thank you, Andy, and Charles to second it. All in favour of accepting the minutes? Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Excellent. Right, do we have any urgent business? Right, do we have any public participation? No? Right, thank you. Do we have any members' declarations of interest on this? Right.
I probably should declare the fact that I am on the Peak District National Park Foundation, and of course the Peak District National Park Foundation are proposing £40,000 to the Sphagnum Lab.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Yvonne.
Hi. It's not an error or declaration. I just wanted to back to the minutes on page 6, paragraph 2 about the query that was raised between difference between an incident and an accident.
Yeah.
Just we haven't had a report from the head of people management.
Right. Thank you.
Yet.
Thank you. Phil, can you?
If you could follow up on that, please. Yeah. Thanks.
Yvonne, can you turn your...
Yeah.
Andrew, can you turn your mic off? Thank you.
So that has been clarified at an internal meeting. So that clarification exists. So if it hasn't been shared with you, I'll make sure that is passed on to you. Because I've heard Teresa explain the difference at, maybe it was a staff meeting.
No, I've not.
No, she has explained it. She hasn't forwarded
Okay.
or explained that onto you on this
No.
committee, so I'll get her to do that.
Okay, then
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you, Phil. But you haven't any conflicts of interest, declarations of interest?
No,
Okay.
I haven't, no.
Andrew Gregory, I think you signalled. Thank you very much. Ruth, I bet you're on the foundation as well, aren't you?
Likewise, yes, I'd like to declare that interest. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. So half the committee's on the foundation. And Ginny Priestley, you're here as an attendee but not a voter, but you're here as Vice Chair of Planning Committee, but also as Chair of Moors for the Future. Thank you. So if we could go on to item number 8, please, which is the substantive item today for decision, which is the Sphagnum Lab. It's a great title for something to talk about, but then I am a bit of a nerd. So, Matt, do you want to come and take this item forward for us, please. Do you want to introduce yourself, just in case not everybody's met you?
I will. Good morning. Morning, committee. I'm Matt Scott Campbell. I'm the Partnership Manager for Moors for the Future Partnership, and I lead the team for us there. I've been doing that role since May, and very happy to be leading the team now, and happy to bring this item this morning. And I just wanted to say, firstly, thanks for, it's a short agenda, and in some senses, it's to sort of facilitate some of the timescales that we have. So just, thank you for convening to look at this item for us. It's actually a really exciting one for us. It's called the Sphagnum Lab project, and you'll have seen that from the report. But it's doing some really important things for our programme in terms of the science and research outcomes and the evidence building around the conservation work that we're doing. But it's also going to provide a really accessible means for us to share that with people. So we have, and I've talked to committee before about, we have a demonstration site on Kinder Scout, which is fantastic and where we've learned a great deal, but it's very remote in terms of being able to bring funders, policymakers, land managing partners, stakeholders to actually come and see what's been achieved up there. And one of the things we wanted to achieve with the Sphagnum Lab was obviously to continue to answer some of our big questions in terms of the science aspects of it, but somewhere that was really accessible, that we could bring people and say, look, this is what we're talking about. When we're talking about active blanket bog, peat forming conditions, this is what it will look like. This is what it should and can look like if we invest into the quality and the condition of the peatlands at that scale. So we've selected a site where we have good connections with partners. It's on a place called Featherbed Moss, which is National Trust land on Ashop Moor. Also on this site, there's been historic research ongoing with the National Trust and Nottingham Trent University. And so there's an amazing opportunity to sort of further that. There's been a lot of work done up there, conservation-wise and science-wise already, and there's a really, really great synergy opportunity to kind of build on that with what we're doing here. And there's a few outcomes from this. As I've said, one of them is the demonstration site value. We'll be able to take people to say, this is what we're talking about. This is what we can all focus on visually, and I think that's really helpful, particularly as we get further down the line with being able to bring these habitats closer to good condition. We're getting closer to that. The more sphagnum we get in, the closer we will get over time. So being able to sort of see somewhere that is illustrative of what good looks like and what's possible, that's so valuable. It'll also help us to continue to develop our best practice in terms of how we plant and how that establishes over time, how quickly do things recover. When we plant in certain densities or plant in certain patterns over different areas, there's some work to be done about how do we optimize what we're doing. And one of the things we're looking in there is we want to find where's the sweet spot between the amount of investment we can generate and the speed at which we can have these habitats recover based on the investment that we're able to put in, let's say on a per hectare basis, for example. We've got an example on the Kinder science work we've done, which shows how quickly something can recover at a very high level of investment. And it's a level of investment that's a bit aspirational for the area that we have to cover. So we're really interested to see, is there a threshold in there where if we invest at, let's say, half the value that we achieved on that particular science, does that mean it recovers at half the speed? It might not. It might recover at 3/4 of the speed or almost as fast. We don't know that. So that sweet spot is something that we really like to find. And then obviously, we'll be furthering our data sets and our evidence, and that gives us the ability to share that with all the practitioners nationally that we work with, our partners, our colleagues. You know, this information would be useful for everybody doing this, and that's a big part of why we want to do it as well, because, you know, we're at the point where we're able to answer some of these questions. So this project is funded partly through the foundation, but also through new partners, Rebel Restoration. And the thing about that is that this is funding that, you know, ordinarily we find very difficult to raise through traditional grant funds or the funds that we've been able to access over our time period. And possibly Tony might say more on that if you have questions around that afterwards. But it's an opportunity that's coming from innovative finance, fundamentally, working with private sector organisations that have aligning values with the, you know, the aims and objectives of the national park and nature recovery. So we're really excited for that opportunity, and we've got the opportunity within this to do you know, a really significant and lengthy piece of science work to 2030. So I think that's probably enough in terms of preamble, but I'm really happy for any questions, and likewise Tony might come and join me if he's got some things to put in. Okay.
Yeah, Tony.
Thanks. I need the microphone.
Yeah, Tony, we might need you to come and sit up here if you're answering questions, so you're on the microphone for the recording. That's all. Thank you, Matt, for that. I think before we open it to members, I think one thing we'll be asking about is Rebel Restoration, and we can see from the second item for information it's been through the due diligence panel already and approved. I'm just wondering, James, as the member on the due diligence panel, is there anything you can tell us about Rebel Restoration and our thoughts of the due diligence panel on that as an organisation to get funding from?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely certain that the due diligence panel has looked at this particular programme. I'm looking at Angela, but I'm not sure that we've looked at this particular programme. We've gone, I don't want to leap onto the next item, but due diligence looks at various things. It looks at the background of companies and whether it affects or impacts our reputation as an organisation, okay?
Yeah.
And we have done that process, I think, for a different element of funding for Moors for the Future. I'm looking at Tony. But irrespective of that, if you're not asking me necessarily about this particular lump of money, Rebel Restoration have gone through the process with the due diligence.
Right.
And we can, as a due diligence panel, give you some confidence that they are, how can I say this, they are a worthy organisation. They will not undermine, they should not undermine our association as an authority.
Yeah.
That's not from a Moors for the Future programme, but our association with them as an authority should not undermine our reputation.
Yeah,
and that they are a worthy and they are a trustworthy organisation insofar as the finances being forthcoming from them. Sorry if that sounds terribly garbled,
no,
but I think you should take some comfort from the fact that we as the due diligence panel have looked at them before.
As an organisation.
With
a view to increased funding for Moors for the Future for it. Thank you. Angela, do you want to add anything to that?
Only to clarify that it was before my time here, but I am aware that historically it has been, the panel has reviewed Rebel Restoration to allow funding up to 500,000, and that's subject to a review in January 2027. So it's been properly reviewed and it's got that threshold on to review it again. So,
good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Tony, do you want to add to that? You're on.
Am I on? Fantastic. Just a very quick canter through the background, as James said, just so for Rebel Restoration, for members that have not heard of them previously, I think nearly 3 years ago now, we first made the relationship with Rebel Restoration and then took them to due diligence, and they funded £7,500 of a restoration plan. And I think the original ceiling limit was 15,000 for them, and then to be reviewed. Since that first engagement with them, and as the partnership's grown, and as Rebel Energy have grown as a company, which feeds into Rebel Restoration, their charity, we then had to go back to due diligence and get that limit increased to 500,000. And now, as you see from this, Rebel Restoration have basically offered £204,000, which is actually they're ready to be taken for this project, and then expect to be able to fund the rest of the project up to £800,000 in the future. So just wanted to sort of share how that relationship has grown from an initial £7,500 collaboration on restoration up to what could be potentially reaching into seven-figure sums as we grow, and it's much appreciation that we've gone through that due diligence process, and the panel have seen fit to say that Rebel Restoration are in fact a very good partner.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry to have sprung that on you, James. I'm just aware it's on the due diligence thing for the next panel. Right, open to questions now. Ruth.
Sorry, Chair, I probably ought to have declared that I'm also the Deputy Chair of Moors for the Future. Ginny Priestley very much takes the lead on it, so I'll abstain from any vote at the end. But
right, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. I just want, my question actually was, thank you very much for bringing this. Could you just give us a little, for those of us who don't know this organisation and haven't sat on the due diligence panel, could you just give us a few bullet points about what is Rebel Restoration? I mean, they're obviously a restoration body, but is it a charity? Is it a CIC? What are we dealing with here? Thank you.
Sure. So, Rebel Restoration are a incorporated charity organisation, and they're the charity arm of a socially responsible, fairly new energy retail company called Rebel Energy. Rebel Energy, their USP is that they offer the best tariffs to the people in society that can least afford electricity and gas. So basically, that's where their tariffs, well, as I've said, that's their USP, and their other USP is that the energy that they offer is all not certified renewable energy. So it's not just, I think there's a way that you can say that you're offering renewable energy where through some form of belonging to a certain body, but it's not guaranteed that everything that you offer is. But Rebel Energy's energy is certified as renewable energy. So that's the energy company, and then Rebel Restoration, a small portion of anybody who is a retail customer of Rebel Energy, a small portion of their bill every month goes into Rebel Restoration. There's the charity, and Rebel Restoration currently supports two main partners. One is Seagrass charity that are looking at restoring seagrass along the Welsh and Scottish coast, and the other is Moors for the Future. And the great thing about this partnership is that as Rebel Energy grows, Rebel Restoration, the funding that goes into Rebel Restoration grows, and providing we, keep fostering the relationship with Rebel Restoration, and they stay as the good people that they are, we will continue to benefit from funding. And we've actually got an annual review in early January with Rebel Restoration, looking at how they're going to fund us going forward. And we've just had their trust board had their AGM at the Moorland Centre, and it was we actually socialised with them after that. It was great to see that their charity board have got members on from the Esby Fairbairn Foundation, RSPB, so very recognisable individuals from reputable organisations. So that's a quick canter through Rebel Energy, Rebel Restoration.
Thank you very much, Tony. I've got James, and then Andrew Gregory, and then Ken Rutledge.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, it is, in my view, a very, very strong understand how it is constituted, but what are you going to do to get people there?
Yeah, it's a good question. But you know, part of as I've said is the science. So it's going to be doing some very good science, but the demonstration site value is also at least half of it for us. So it's going to be very connected to our communications and engagement program fundamentally. So it's a kind of fully across the program type project. It has some conservation work in it, so we'll actually be doing some conservation work. It's then doing the science, but around it will be built a program of events, and typically we do get asked to host visits from policymakers and things like that at very short notice, and we often want to show them the most important thing that we can, and it's too far. Oftentimes they'll be arriving at a station, we'll need to pick them up, they'll have 2 hours, they probably won't be having the outdoor equipment and necessarily the time to get up, a big hill. So, where we've chosen is less than a 10-minute walk from a road where we can get them to, and that's it. So there'll be some of that ad hoc ability, but equally, through things like the business development part of the program, Tony will also have the ability to bring potential new funding partners to kind of have a look at it, and again, that forms part of our thinking. And then also working with our, established partners. Many of them are also active now in restoration, and we can take people out and facilitate them getting more involved in doing more restoration on areas that they have management over, and likewise with our partners in the land managing and owning community. There's another opportunity there to go and look at what good and what's possible on the ground. So it'll be integrated. Well, once we get it set up, it'll be a firm pillar within kind of our comms and engagement plan and our ongoing business development.
Thank you. Andrew Gregory.
Thanks, Jed. Just to come back on the Rebel restoration point, I was just having a look on my phone at Charity Commission's website, just have a look at them. And, I'm sure, when I looked at their website, I'm sure they're absolutely everything you said. Trustee board looks really impressive from that. Absolutely no doubt, and for a moment that there's not any issues with them. However, just having a looking at their accounts filed, their year-end September, filed last March, the balance sheet shows they've got 111,000. So on the face of it, I know, albeit that's a historical position, and of course things moved on because accounts are filed historically. But on the face of it, on paper, they haven't actually got the money on their accounts as that last set of filed accounts. Now, I'm sure that's fine, because I'm sure that, they're supported by another company. The company will move money in as and when to support the charity, but I'd suggest that we just make certain that we've asked all the right questions about their accounts as part of this process.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think Tony and Matt, can you note that? Although my sense is that the work will happen when the money comes in. So, and this Programmes and Resources Committee is there to approve up to a certain point when the money comes in. Tony, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just to say that the money's actually sat there ready to be transferred to us.
Yeah.
It's literally waiting on this decision.
Okay.
And I think, Andrew, you're right. They, since those last accounts have been filed, the organisation. I was at the trustees meeting when they were talking about accounts, and there's significantly more cash in the organisation, but it's basically very much a transitory account. It goes, they're not allowed to sit on it. The money goes in, and then it comes straight out of the account again.
Thank you. Ken Rustledge.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask a similar question, but I've just looked at the Rebel restoration. In the UK, we have 13% of the world's peatlands. We're right above the weight, and then it goes on to say it sequester carbon, support biodiversity. But our peatlands are so degraded and mismanaged that they're source of greenhouse gas emissions. And it says that, the peatlands are a rainforest. I think if this lab is approved, and you're thinking, the Peak District National Park, we've got significant areas. Think of, obviously Kinder Scouts and all that round area. In a nutshell, presumably you're talking about putting sphagnum moss up there, and if this, show how you would do that. I mean, how simply does that work? How would it improve and prevent the greenhouse gases?
Matt, I think that's for
Not
you.
maybe prevent them, but reduce them.
Yeah, thanks.
Stops their emissions.
Yeah, you'll have to. I'll try and be as brief as I can because I could go all day. Don't start me with that. But yeah, so the peatlands in our region have suffered from a legacy of atmospheric pollution from industrial times. Whichever way the wind was blowing at one point or another, we would have had soot and things coming down. And what that did was to kill off the living layer at the top of a bog. So a peat bog, in our region, our blanket peats are, many meters deep in some places, but fundamentally that is partially decomposed organic matter that's just fully waterlogged in a normal healthy bog, and the bit that lives is like the top 6 to 10 inches, and they call that the acrotelm. Now that is in peat forming conditions made up of a blanket of sphagnum through which other plants, grasses, dwarf shrubs, rushes, other things are growing in a mosaic. But it's that living layer that fundamentally is storing the peat in a kind of condition where it isn't bare and eroding. So what we had was the loss of that layer. And the work of this partnership and others besides has been about, firstly, addressing bare peat where that has existed. That's been extensive over the Peak District, and over the last 20 years I think we've done something like revegetate 35 square kilometres, or an area equivalent to that, within a wider area of 240 square kilometres. So there's this revegetation piece. Because they were eroding, they've also gullied. So the high rainfall for this region has caused a lot of erosion. So the peat bogs, the hydrology in them is also degraded, and we haven't got that fully waterlogged peat mass in a lot of places, and we're working on that. And again, ourselves and other partners have been addressing that. But the sphagnum is like the last stage. When you've got a place revegetated, when you've done what you can to restore the hydrology and create those wet, waterlogged conditions, you can then put the sphagnum back in place. And at that point, the bog is, in effect, storing its carbon rather than releasing it through oxidization or erosion. And the sphagnum is the bit that enables it to actually sequester and create new peat. It takes thousands of years to create peat, but, we've seen from the suppliers that we work with and others besides that, if you revegetate bare peat, you reduce the particulate carbon emission by 90% within a very short space of time. If you can get it re-wetted, that's so ever much better. And then if you can get the sphagnum re-established for that carpet of sphagnum, that living layer, then the habitats are in a resilient position. And if they are able, within a climate change scenario, to form new peat, in decades and hundreds of years to come, they will be in a position to do that and have the adaptability and resilience to hopefully persist.
Thank you.
It's all right.
Thank you for that succinct and clear explanation, Matt. Charles.
Thank you, yeah. So I had the benefit of a bit of an involved explanation from Tony about Rebel Energy and Rebel Restoration when we were doing the agenda planning session. And for today's agenda, the potential from Rebel Energy and Rebel Restoration for the authority and for most for the future, I think is the big standout for me. I think it's early days as an energy company, but I think it could be a fantastic opportunity for the authority and for most for the future. It's brilliant that you've landed them, and I really hope that this project is something that they see the merits of, and perhaps in future there might be scope to pick up even more project funding from them. So
I'm just going to say they're aware of and are interested in looking at what happens on Morriture country. So they're not just purely about sphagnum and the hill. They're looking at other aspects within the authority.
So it's a brilliant piece of work to have got them interested. Specifically on the Sphagnum Lab, I think it's one of those where there's the challenge about some of the restoration work and some of the sphagnum planting. So for some of the moorland owners, will have perhaps raised issues or concerns with it. And the reality of it is that I think it's going to take some proper evaluation to be able to demonstrate where and how it's effective. And I think it's, as Matt said, it's that bit of it's not black or white, and it's not one size fits all. But there's far more nuance to it. But sometimes I think that some of the people who they've got a loud voice, shall we say, some of the critics, and I think perhaps they overreach themselves at times. But with an evidence base, there's a chance to rebut it, as well as to work out how to do the restoration work most effectively. So the two bits together, the Sphagnum Lab is great. I know it's going to be years before we have some hard evidence from it, but the Sphagnum Lab is great, but also the rebel restoration aspect of it is really promising as well. So
Thank you.
well
Charles, are you willing to move the recommendations?
oh, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from the committee? James?
I was just going to make a point, actually, just to follow up my earlier point about showcasing it. Your description in response to Ken's question I thought was really interesting. How also can you use this to demystify the science behind all of this? I mean, you just made it very clear in, 3 or 4 minutes. And, a lab immediately makes it sound terribly scientific and terribly, in the know kind of thing. Schools work, general popularisation of the importance of this. I think that's another element of your communications that you shouldn't overlook in this, and I'm sure you won't, given that it's only 10 minutes from the road and you can probably corral a school group up the road in 10 minutes. But just a point, really, Chair, that this is an opportunity to help demystify what is sometimes as Emperor's new clothes,
Yes.
I understand what that is. Please put that in your back pocket and think about it.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I think you're right. It's these are dynamic and changing habitats that are in an affected state, because of society's activities around industry and things like that. It's a difficult and complicated area. But I think having something out of this like best practice guidance will help, and the ability to look at what's possible and take people up there and just talk it through, and just talk it through fundamentally. Have the ability to have dialogue about what are different groups of that are active in this arena. What are we finding? Where's the commonalities? Where are the bits where our findings are different? Why are they different? And it might be we can tweak the science as we go along, because it's a learning curve, really. What we know is that, there's strong evidence that it's successful, and we need to be confident about moving ahead and recovering nature, possibly without having all the evidence kind of already there. But that's why that dialogue's important, because, like you say, there's still things to find out. And if we wait to find all of it out, it'll be really too late. So yeah, thank you for that point. And
Yeah, thank you.
and we actually have taken university groups out, and that all of that sort of stuff will form part of the way that we'll do it as well.
And I guess it's a complementary offer to the Bogtastic van as well. You can bring the two together. One's a show site and the other is the getting out into the cities to explain as another form of engagement. I've got Ken Rustledge coming back with a small comment, and
Just
then
a very,
Ruth.
A very, very quick question, please, Chair. the other thing you just meant that on the peat, it's very denuded, and so you mentioned all gullies and water. One I'm thinking of, think of Kinderscout, think of Saddleworth Moor, think of the Staffordshire moorlands. The question is flooding. Would by doing this, and if this laboratory gains fruition and thinking forward, would that help mitigate against flooding, which has been very much in the media recently, certainly in my area?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is that is part of our research design on this, and indeed it was on our research site up on Kinderscout. So what we evidenced on Kinderscout in terms of natural flood management benefit was that if you revegetate bare peat, block the erosion channels and have them re-sediment out, re-establish vegetation and a carpet of sphagnum, the water leaving that site leaves it 680% slower than if it's in a bare and degraded condition. So really significant NFM, natural flood management benefit. So it really slows the water down. So, these are catchment areas. All of the areas that we're tending to work on in these upland peats, they're the top of a watershed. So all of that water at some point goes in the becks, down into the rivers, ends up in the lowland areas. And if you can hold the water in a bog, and a bog is a wetland, it should be wet and it should be waterlogged. If you can hold the water there, it's not flashy and running down into lower areas of the catchment at speed in rainfall events. And so healthy peat bogs, have a natural processes benefit from a natural flood management perspective. And we have demonstrated that with our first site. So in effect, we will use part of this experiment to create a replicate of that science so that we've got one example of it working, and then we'll have a second example of it working as well. And when you build scientific replicates in terms of your evidencing, you are very much strengthening the findings that you've already made as well.
Just a supplementary for that, occurred to me with all this, get the climate a few years ago, I was in the army, and they had to call Army UNICEF to help Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue when Saddleworth Moor became alive. And that's because probably it's so denuded. If we had the sphagnum loss, if this laboratory and plans gain fruition, that would mitigate as well against fires and future. Certainly the national level was creating alarm and despondency with coma sites.
Yeah, and that's another part of it. A healthy peat bog that is in a peat forming condition where there's the water table's high in the peat level is going to be far more resilient, in the face of a risk of a damaging wildfire event. That forms part of the findings that we'll continue our learning about that through this as well.
Thank you. Ruth, and then I'll take it to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to preface my comments by just saying I think it's a fantastic idea. But I've got two short questions, one relating to project management and the second to research. As a carbon and research manager in my day job, there's no doubt I'll have questions. But with respect to section 3.5 of the paper, where you talk about project management, so this land is obviously owned by the National Trust, and it says in the third bullet point there that you will liaise with the landowner as required, at least yearly. There does seem to be quite a lot of capital, sort of actual physical work that has to happen here with the planting and everything. I suppose I just want to be reassured that that wouldn't be held up by any procedures that the National Trust might have about their land. I mean, has that relationship, I know you do have an ongoing relationship with them, as does the Peak District National Park, but is that actually completely understood how that's going to happen? Maybe you can respond to that first.
So yes, that is understood how that's going to happen, and that's actually one of the reasons we're grateful to bring this today, because if we're successful in sort of having approval, we can be at readiness to actually begin the planting, after Christmas. That's the plan. So we've already got that lined up with partners, and as you say, we work really closely with colleagues at the National Trust on this and many other projects besides. So we will have had the conversations around how's this in terms of consenting, for example, from SSI perspective, land access, all of those sorts of things. And the other thing I was supposed to put into the context is that it's actually a relatively small amount of capital works by our ordinary standards, but it will be more intensive in terms of its planting than other areas. So it's a kind of a small area in a kind of an experimental plot, if you will, albeit that it's quite large as an experimental plot, but compared to, let's say, kind of the planting that we would be doing on other sites, it's quite limited.
Thank you. And your second question, Ruth?
Yeah, just briefly. So the second question relates to the research activity. So this idea of it being a demonstration lab, and I think that's really key, about getting the message out there about this site. Seeing is believing for many people. You obviously have an existing partnership there with NTU, Nottingham Trent University. You also mentioned potential links to Manchester University as well. How open will this be in terms of other researchers knowing this is a lab, in a sense? I mean, I totally understand it's quite fragile as well. You need to manage that process. But what are your, if you can just briefly give us an idea of how are you going to make sure that that opportunity for work and for science, as well as for public communication, all those other things, is as widely known across the research community in the UK as possible? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a part of the thinking, and I would defer that question to my colleague Steve Maynard, who's our science and research program manager. He can't be with us today because he's actually on a interview panel for a PhD that we're working with. But in effect, we've got the opportunity with this to actually revitalise the previous piece of research that was done on the site, and that's part of the project design. And obviously we have our own research that we're putting in through the project. But similar to all of our other projects, all of our findings are published, and we make them available on our website, and share them with partners and widely with the community of practitioners that we're part of. So we'll be speaking at webinars, and this is quite common that we're asked to do this. So we'll be really open with all of the people involved in it that we want to share this, and tell people what we've found out. And with the best practice, we'd like to share that as widely as possible. So it's not just the work of this partnership and our authority that is benefiting, but that people throughout the Great North Bog chain can also benefit from this. So it's something that I think we're going to be intentional about. I haven't got all of the what are the answers and what are the events, what are the types of things that we're going to do, but it's definitely part of our thinking to kind of make sure that this evidence, and as we were saying earlier, there is the need to have a dialogue about this and have something clear that people can understand. So we'll be looking for opportunities to do that. And one of the ways we will do that is by embedding the outcomes from this project in our communications and engagement program as well. Like how can I work with my colleagues to make sure that all of the opportunities that we have for sharing this and stimulating further research with other partners, wider partners, how can we take those? And that might be a bit iterative. It's often the case that opportunities that we don't yet know about will come, and we'll take them as they arrive. But underlying a lot of this is also there's a sense of urgency about this data in the face of a climate emergency, and we're really focused that we don't want, whilst a replica is a very useful thing in a scientific terms, we also don't want people duplicating effort. If we can answer a question and share that with a community that's working within that arena. That's precisely our objective with that.
Thank you, Matt. We've had quite a fulsome discussion about this, and thank you, committee members, and to Matt and Tony for responding to that. We have 5 recommendations in front of us. The first one is to approve acceptance of funds up to a maximum of £800,000, and then the terms of the funding to be delegated to the Head of Assets and Enterprise in consultation with Finance. That authorities delegate to the authority solicitor relating to the terms and conditions. Any further need to look at due diligence approval is in there as well, should that be needed, and that subject to procurement standing orders, they can enter into contracts. And finally, the project is to be monitored on an ongoing basis by the Audit, Budget and Project Risk Monitoring Group. So those are the 5 recommendations in front of us. One is, in principle, we accept the funding, and then a series of delegations and monitoring and assessment after that. We've had Charles move the recommendation. Do I have someone to second it? Ken Rustledge, thank you. Can I have a vote for all those in favour of this motion? Okay, anyone against? And Ruth, we noted your abstention because of a declaration of interest. So go ahead and get planting. And thank you ever so much for the responses and the presentation today, both of you. And it's a really interesting project, and look forward to hearing progress of it through the Audit, Budget and Project Risk Management Group. So thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Committee. Really appreciate the support. Many thanks.
And have a good Christmas.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could move on to the next item, please, which is an item for information only, is the annual report of the due diligence panel. Angela, is this for you, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report is self-explanatory. It's for noting. It's the actions. It's a summary of the actions and decisions made by the due diligence panel over the last 12 months. We've heard one of them, the main one there from Rebel Restoration. So it's all self-explanatory. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions on this? Okay. I've got one question, which is, should members want to find out more detail, where are the minutes of the due diligence panel available?
They are, because they can contain sensitive information, they're not publicly available,
Yeah.
but we can provide redacted versions to members.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if there's no... James, would you like to comment?
Just one observation, given the fact that I'm involved in this. Yes, you'll have seen that we make a few approvals, but on a regular basis we look at all the contributions that people make through the visitor centres, which is actually very revealing, because I would say the average contribution per person in the visitor centre from a donation point of view is 0.2p or some such, which really...
That's of all people visiting, not all people who...
No, all people. I mean, people come in and they'll say, right, well, you know, where are the loos or some such, and they may leave 2p or some such, and I think that's actually quite interesting insofar. I'm not just saying it to be light-hearted. It's actually very interesting to demonstrate the challenge that we have to generate income through our visitor centres.
Yeah.
People are not inclined to make ad hoc, as they might see, contributions to the running of the park through the visitor centres, which is one of the challenges we face, and indeed one of the issues that is being addressed in the new plan for the visitor centres. Yeah. I'm not sure we will be looking at those in future, but I would be confident that we'll be looking at more and higher contributions given the plans in place. It's just very revealing.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you. I mean, some of it may be that we're in a cashless society now, so there isn't... Even so, yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Phil, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Just to say that we have now installed the new till system. That's happened over the last few weeks, which will now allow people making a purchase to be asked if they'd like to make a donation to the foundation. So up until now, it was very difficult to do that. Now, I haven't seen any results of that yet, but I understand that has been implemented. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of report back at the
So is
appropriate
this when
point.
you use a card reader, it says, would you like to donate?
I don't know if it's just on, I think it's anyone now doing a transaction, the till will allow, and I don't know the details of how it works, but prior to that, it was very difficult to kind of ask someone and have a way of capturing that.
Yeah.
So it should be like in a petrol station where
Yeah.
you have to press yes or no for a
Yeah.
donation. It
Yeah.
should be that, but also there's this training going on as well to make sure people are confident to make those asks and be able to explain what the foundation is.
Excellent.
I think it's too early to know any results on that yet, but I will myself be interested to see how that goes, and I'm happy to report back on that.
Thank you. Ken Rustledge.
I was really just going to make the self-same point. I think Phil was very much ahead of me. I mean, the one thing is, say you're going into, use the lose or something, it's like changeover, it's a cashless society. And, I mean, I don't know there's an easy solution to that. I don't know if you can't really charge people who haven't got a bank card, but, anything like that just to get some extra money. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. To expedite time, we have two recommendations. This is really for noting. Do we have someone willing to move these recommendations for noting? Charles, seconded by Andrew Gregory. All in favour of these recommendations? Anyone against? No, and no abstentions. So thank you for that, for information. We now need to move to Part B to deal with some exempt information. So can I have someone to move the recommendation to move to Part B? Ken Smith, second.